We're just chit-chatting here in the background. Thank you so much for your tweets and everyone who's using the hashtag. Don't forget to ask a question using hashtag MobileArray EV launch. Sorry, all one word. Yes, apologies. Now we have Colin Walker and Kate Tyrrell with us. If you're in the EV community, you might be familiar with these two personalities. Very, very strong. Colin Walker, introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about what you do.
Hi, my name's Colin Walker. I'm Head of Transport at the rather flamboyantly named Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit.
I love that name.
I know, it's ECIU for short. Yeah. But I suppose in a nutshell, most of my work is trying to kind of challenge a lot of the myths and the misleading narratives, we call them, that surround the whole EV transition and try to get the actual facts out there.
And you're doing a great job with that, because I've been following your Twitter since we met at the LinkedIn Audio, and you certainly are doing that. So tell me, what are the top two myths that people often say about EVs that you know are not true?
To be honest, it changes an awful lot of the time. One myth will be really strong and then suddenly everyone will stop talking about it. So a few months ago, all people were talking about was this idea that the allegedly extra weight of EVs was going to result in all our car parks collapsing. And then everyone realised that was absolute nonsense. So then that kind of faded away. And then it was suddenly, EVs cost a fortune to insure. Well, actually, no, insurance premium is actually a little less than petrol. So it kind of ebbs and flows. So I think we can discount a lot of the slightly more nonsensical ones. I think the persistent ones are the idea that EVs are too expensive. And undoubtedly, upfront costs for new EVs are very high. But new cars have always been prohibitively expensive for most people. That's why 80% of car sales in the UK are second-hand. And what we have seen in the second-hand market is EVs have largely reached price parity with their petrol equivalents. So we've actually got through that barrier. But even though we are at price parity, people still believe that EVs are not for them, that they are too expensive. So trying to get through that kind of resistance is difficult. And I think one of the other persistent ones that is holding people back is this notion that if you buy a second-hand EV, you're going to, in a few years' time, have to spend a huge amount of money replacing the battery, which is not borne out by any of the facts. Often the batteries outlast the cars. But yeah, I think consumers seem to need more reassurance that they're going to be fine.
I've actually got one to add to that.
Yeah, great. Add away.
Add an extra one into the mix. I got my village newsletter the other day, and it's a tiny little village in the Southern Cotswolds. It's really cute. And on it was talking about the potholes on the local roads, and how if you have an electric vehicle, if you could please be a little bit more careful on the soft verges. And I thought, I'm going to write to whoever is the editor on this newsletter and let them know that they are very wrong.
I think I know exactly which article that's probably prompted that. The Daily Mail wrote an article claiming that heavier EVs were responsible for Britain's pothole problems. But the report they quoted actually made no reference to didn't use the phrase electric vehicle in it once. It was completely misleading for them to claim that this report into potholes was blaming EVs. So we were actually successful in actually writing to the Daily Mail and getting them to change the headline, which is great.
Oh, really?
But no,
good, yeah.
Yeah, but the problem is no one sees the correction.
Yes.
Everyone goes away remembering the article,
it's like
and it's a tiny little begrudging kind of, fair enough.
Apologise.
Yeah, so, and that is a wonderful example of how this misinformation spreads, and it can pop up.
It's in the village newsletter now.
Well, it's in the village newsletter, it'd be on in
The
mass.
fudge is
If it was
real.
Ireland, it'd be in mass, on a Sunday.
So it's spreading from the Daily Mail down to Stroud Local.
And so for you then, Kate, let's go to you, Kate. So Kate, the famous Kate. Kate hates that microphone, doesn't she? She's like,
take it
can't
away.
Get the microphone back off, Kate. But Kate, you're brilliant. You're doing amazing things, especially in the safety space, especially when it comes to charge safe and what you're doing there. And, I'd like to commend you on that, because, it's really important, because since I've been learning about EVs, I have noticed that I'm looking at chargers and where they're located and stuff. And there was one, I think I mentioned this to you the other day. It was a hotel, quite a good hotel where I live in Wexford. And the charger was right down the back where the back kitchen door was. And there was no lighting or anything. And I was like, oh my gosh, imagine that's where the electric charger is. So tell us a little bit about Charge Safe and what you do.
So I think the really positive thing here is that the new installs that we're seeing that are being delivered now are so much better than the legacy stuff that's out there. And likely the charge point that you visited, I imagine, was probably a Polar Now BP Pulse, usually on a massive concrete plinth right in the furthest corner that nobody would want to possibly visit, which seems to have been the template contract that went out for those installs. So what we do at ChargeSafe is we're a 5-star rating system for safety and accessibility of public charging infrastructure. That 5 stars is really there to inform members of the public on where they can best charge their vehicle if their personal safety is a major consideration. So at 2 a.m. your needs will be very different to what they are at 11 a.m. And just to be more informed on, what the lighting is like, what the security is like, if there's a decent amount of human activity, or if you're visible to the road, at least from where you're charging. Accessibility is a huge one for us. So we've recently had the BSI PAS 1899 published, which is fantastic. It's the standard that helps support anybody delivering electric vehicle charging infrastructure to ensure that it's super accessible. However, it is the minimal requirement of delivering EV charging infrastructure. So what we do at ChargeSafe is we look at the overall user experience and how we can ensure that we're not just doing the minimum, that we're really making as much of the infrastructure as safe and accessible for everybody to be able to use it, whether they are in a wheelchair or, they only have the use of one hand, if they are a pregnant mother with several smaller children that they have to be concerned about getting in and out of the vehicle safely, elderly people. There's just so much more to it. Really what we're doing is raising awareness for the infrastructure and the challenges that are there. I'm really grateful to say that actually the most recent stuff that's being delivered is up to speed. But we are at, 60,000 chargers installed, I believe. And when we started ChargeSafe, it was closer to 20,000. Nice. So in 2.5 years, we've tripled the infrastructure, and we're only just coming up to a standard that is passable. So we have got our work cut out for us when it comes to those legacy installs and retrofitting and making improvements to what's already in the ground.
And that's only in the UK, is it?
Yeah, just in
so
the
you still haven't come to Ireland yet?
No,
Oh my goodness.
We need to get over to Ireland. We've been asked
someone
to come
now
to Ireland.
in Ireland.
We've been asked by a couple of businesses, in fact, to
Yeah.
come over to Ireland. So we will be over there soon.
Great. Well done. And, I think if anyone is interested, it's ChargeSafe.
ChargeSafe.uk.
.co.uk.
.uk.
Not
Apologies.
.co.
And
Apologies.
also we have an app just like you guys.
So
it's the EV ChargeSafe app, which is available on iOS and Android. So whilst you're downloading your Mobular Ray EV app, get the ChargeSafe one too.
That I recommend doing that, everybody, or we'll get in trouble with Kate because she has the microphone. So Colin, back to you. So Colin, were you always interested in sustainability and all of this, or did you just kind of end up in this space?
Well, good question. I for about 15 years, I worked in advocacy and campaigning for a lot of charities. So people like Save the Children, Mind, Plan. So I've always kind of had a general kind of
just campaigning for something.
Just try and...
He's a good guy, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Just a kind of general motivation to work in something the way you think what you're doing is making things
with a purpose.
A tiny bit better.
Yeah.
But then I had a break, and my main hobby is cycling, so I ended up at British Cycling for 3-4 years.
That's right.
Which is pretty cool when your main office is like the Velodrome in Manchester and you're watching a GB team just going round and round, and they come back from the Olympics with 10 golds. It's pretty awesome. But I think I'd always wanted to kind of get more involved in the climate crisis space, do my bit to try and help move us to net zero. And there's probably areas that people focus on more than transport, but it is the single biggest emitting sector of CO2 in the UK, and we don't talk about it enough. And over half of that comes from the cars that we drive. We're simply not going to achieve net zero if we don't shift to zero carbon emitting vehicles. So I do think by trying to tackle the misinformation around EVs that it's holding people back from making that transition. Hopefully I'm doing a little bit to help us move to net zero, and also deliver people just don't seem to understand how much they can save by driving an EV. So I honestly believe, particularly in the midst of a cost of living crisis in the UK, that if we can help people get into EVs, they'll ultimately end up with more money in their pocket, which is something I think a lot of people really need.
I don't think people hear that enough, though,
No.
do they? I don't think so. I think they seem to think it's not, that it's more expensive.
We often lead on the economic benefits of moving to an EV rather than the environmental, because we think that actually probably resonates with more people.
Right.
So yeah, but yeah, that's a good example of the misinformation doing the rounds. People aren't very good at knowing quite how much running a car costs. I don't think people realise how much they spend a month on running a car, whether it's the depreciation, the insurance, the fuel. But when you add it all together, and then you go in and say, well, you can literally fuel an EV for like 9-10 times less, then those monthly costs really come down.
Right.
But it's definitely those upfront costs that are holding people back, which is why I'm so excited about what's happening in the second-hand market. We're beginning to see, all those EVs that were sold to leasing companies about 3-4 years ago start arriving on the second-hand market in quite considerable numbers. And that's why Auto Trader have said recently that EVs are the fastest-selling fuel type of car on their websites. The market's pretty much doubled in a year. So people, I think what this shows, when you get price parity, it demonstrates that the demand for EVs is there.
So then, Kate, actually, that would actually make a difference to you then. I mean, and then Mobile Array EV as well, because if that's true, then more people are switching to EV. This message needs to get out there. Just a final question to you, Kate. Is there any way that people watching today could support you in your quest, I suppose? Do you have like a blog or anything we can share, or is there anything that you're up to soon that we can support?
I would love to have a blog that you could share. I just don't have the time to write one, I'm afraid. So I think the best and easiest way to support us is to download the app. Members of the public can actually register their details and rate public charges themselves.
Oh, I like that idea. Yeah.
So and they can collect points, and points will equal prizes to come soon. But we have got like a championship league table, and I know that we have people who drive up and down the UK on their weekends just so that they can collect all that information and get to the top of the leadership board, which is absolutely brilliant. So yes, please just download the app, join our community and give us as much feedback as you can, because as you'll know, releasing an app, it comes with a huge amount of technical challenges, so feedback is super important.
Yeah, so they can help you with feedback and stuff. Yeah, absolutely. And I know that Marvin's watching, and Lucy, I saw Lucy putting up a comment there, so I know there are lots of people that support you a lot. And Colin, is there anything you have coming up before we wrap up?
I guess the main thing is, a lot of our time is just trying to kind of like challenge misinformation in the media, or do our own analysis and try to get that placed. But I mean, be careful what you're signing up for. But if you want to keep an idea of what we're doing, maybe follow me on Twitter.
Oh, don't maybe. Just follow him on Twitter. Colin Walker 3, is it? Colin Walker.
I can't even remember. Colin
anyway,
Walker
it'll be on the
79 or
hashtag
something,
today.